One of my favorite definitions comes from Sir Ken Robinson, and he says it's the idea of creating unique ideas that have value. I would even add into that sometimes reflect ourselves personally. There's a little piece of your soul that goes into things that we do. The idea of creating always blows me away because you're basically like conjuring a new idea or a new thing out of the air, out of nothing.
It is amazing to have the opportunity to chat with you in person.
Yes.
Part of the reason I'm so excited about this conversation is because you and I recorded a conversation on exactly this topic, creativity. And I have to tell you, I asked a previous guest what they were most excited about being here in person in New Orleans at ISTE. And I'm most excited about the opportunity to meet you in person. We also did this super fun collaboration doing a video about Google Jamboard that was a total blast. So it is wonderful to be here, to meet you.
Yes.
What are you most excited about being back here in person in New Orleans at ISTE?
Well, being back in person in New Orleans and ISTE, it seems like every conversation I've had, everybody I've talked to is talking about how apart we've been for so long, and it's like it starts to make us realize, I think, how important that is. How important those relationships are, and when it's like the 80s song, don't know what you got till it's gone. Like it was gone for a while and now here we are again. And that's what I keep hearing everybody. It's like the hugs are a little bit tighter and the smiles are a little bit wider, I think, because, we realize what we've got and we've got it back. And also cafe au lait and beignets and New Orleans. I've never been to New Orleans before, so just checking all of this out has been, it's been less than 24 hours and I'm just trying to soak it in as much as I can.
Did you walk off the plane and just have this like, whoa, it is hot here?
Yes.
Coming from California.
It was like plane and then jet bridge and it was like, oh, it's hot. And then airport it was like, oh, it's cold. And back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you're not from California. I'm saying me, you get a little bit more.
Yes.
Yeah. The Midwest kind of,
Yeah,
totally.
We know our humidity out there, that's for sure.
Yeah, I lived in Ohio for a bit, so I feel it. I feel your pain. So we're talking about creativity, and let's start just by establishing, because I think there's actually some confusion about even what it means to teach creativity, that creativity is about teaching kids how to do art, right? So when we're talking about the importance of creativity, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah. And I think you're right. You can define it in so many different ways. I would even add into that sometimes reflect ourselves personally. And so I think whenever we get into creativity, there's a little piece of your soul that goes into things that we do, that we create. And of course the word create is at the heart of creativity. So we're making something, whether we're making it from scratch or the idea of creating always blows me away because you're basically like conjuring a new idea or a new thing out of the air, out of nothing, either out of a blank canvas or a blank document or, whatever, but you're creating something of value, whether it's monetary value, some people do it to, like sell, or if it's, personal intrinsic value, or in the classroom, of course, of value to reflect what you've learned or reflect what you think or how you've changed or something. Like, I think it all sort of plays into that.
So there are all these creativity apps out there that teachers can use.
Right.
And I wonder if there is a way in which they can be used more effectively, be used in a way that is actually rigorously creating.
Yeah.
Because you see creativity at the top of Bloom's taxonomy.
Right.
It's the highest level skill. But sometimes I wonder, well, if you're just creating a graphic design, are you actually achieving that level of thinking? So what tips do you have for teachers who want to do something like that?
You're looking at me, right?
That's right. I know Holly's got thoughts. I'll give you this
Rigorous
one little
creativity.
one, and then I want to hear from her because I know it goes deep with Holly on this one. But I was thinking about your Bloom's taxonomy idea, and if you look at it as kind of like a pyramid, you always see the top part of it is the creativity, like that peak, right? But if it's not connected down through the other stuff, I think we're kind of like chopping that top part off. And you can have that kind of like dangling, kind of like floating out in the middle of nowhere. You can do creativity for the sake of creativity, and that's all well and good. But in the classroom, we always want it rooted back into what are the students learning? What do they need to learn? What are they showing us what they've learned? And whenever it's not rooted and connected down through all those other parts, then it kind of goes against the whole reason that we're there, the whole reason that we exist, you know? So when it's all connected together really well, I think that's really, really important. Anyway, that's where I'm going on that.
So you can't see the screen, but Stacy Joy says, "Hey Matt, so excited to see you. Can you believe it?"
No, oh my goodness, Stacy, that's amazing.
So Matt knows what I'm going to say. That the creativity is super important. The tools for it are endless. I'd like to see people using tools outside of slides to do it. But my thing is that we've got to do this thing called press record. Once you've created something, I want to hear about the ideas behind that creation. What made you choose the things that you did? What was the process that you went through? And I think in education, we're really starting to do the creativity part, but we're not adding that talk to me about that design, because that's where the critical thinking happens. That's when I know my student and who they are. And that's the change I think we need to make in 2022, 23 is that press record. Like now that we've made it, because you can make a poster on Adobe or whatever, but I want to know more about that. And that's so critical.
Yeah. And to kind of riff off of that, like, you know, you can have students create something. See, a lot of times we get sort of stuck in the product and we would just look at the product and the student gets done making something, they're like, here, I made this. And the teacher might look at it and go, well, I don't even understand that. Well, it's because you haven't asked the student what it means and where it's coming from and what their thought process was and everything. There's a lot of that, you know. So if you look at, say, something as simple as the student does a short writing prompt and you read through what they've written, you only get part of the story that way. You only see the end product. But of course, we don't know what was the process. What did they struggle with? What did they learn? What did they have to work through? Why did they put that one word in that one place? Yeah. There's like a big story behind everything that students create for us. Again, create at the heart of that word creativity. And when we don't take the time to dive into that, that's where we start to lose some of the gold in all of this. And of course, the great part about this is it doesn't take extra time and effort to do that. It's just a simple question. If you're willing to ask, right? If you're willing to ask, tell me about this. Tell me about your process in this. Tell me about why you did this the way that you did it. If we just take a moment to ask them that, A, it gives us information to figure out what they've done, but B, it gives them the opportunity to reflect on it in a way that they might not otherwise. So it's just like little simple things like that load up the learning in a way that we wouldn't get otherwise.
Mm-hmm. It's also a clear way to scaffold metacognition, to implement some of the ideas behind universal design for learning to address learner variability. It can become a practice that can be regularly implemented. And I think something that is also a very clear, tangible way, like you said with Press Record, that teachers can use technology in a meaningful, strategic way. And that doesn't even have to be technology only. You could have kids still making their poster.
Sure.
It's a poster on paper.
Yeah.
They layer that. There's some metacognitive piece, a reflective piece that comes after. That's where technology, I think, is really powerful in its ability to allow you to multimedia layer, to share that with other students, to share that with families.
Yeah.
And we're missing that. And that's the part that's bothering me, is that because we think we're going to Adobe or Canva and making something and kids are creating, and we're missing the talk about it. Yeah. That's just like my message right now. It has been.
Yeah,
actually.
and just like you said, Sam, it doesn't even have to take technology necessarily. It's like, what can you make and what can you tell me about the process and what you've, and that stuff just takes a little bit of time. And it's it's one of those, like, doesn't take much time, produces lots of results. That's the kind of stuff that we're looking for.
Now, you said, Holly, that a lot of teachers are going to Canva and Adobe, having students make things there. We also know that there are a lot of teachers who are not at that step yet, and I think probably because of a perception about creativity that it is teaching students to do art, and maybe we don't have time to do art in a history class. We don't have time to do, where does that fit into my math class? So what do you say to a teacher who is maybe interested in some of these ideas, but they're not yet at the place of figuring out how they integrate Adobe or Canva into their math class or their history class? What's a good place to start for them, or what's a mindset shift even that they could adopt about the importance of bringing in creativity? Or Matt?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It looked like you were thinking.
I was thinking.
You're thinking.
But
Okay.
I want you to respond.
I have a place where you can start. So I think what the biggest thing I would say is start small. You just start with something little and just kind of see how it goes. Now, of course, the very first time that you try something, if it doesn't go quite the way that you want, that doesn't mean that it's a failure. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it again. So I think if you just do a little bit of that and then look at it and go, what did I think about that? What was, what was the good out of that? Is it worth trying it again and trying it a little bit differently? And another safe place, I think, to start when it comes with all of that is to start in a place where you aren't getting great results anyway. I remember reading a blog post by John Spencer once where he was talking about the last days before winter break. And he says, when all the other teachers are playing Frosty the Snowman and Elf, maybe now is the time to try something kind of cool where you're not sure how it's going to go. And, if everybody else is doing all of that stuff, like it's kind of a low stakes opportunity to try something new. I think those are two great places to get started.
I love that. And I want to say with math and people who haven't tried stuff, definitely the low stakes is amazing, but I want us to talk about transfer of knowledge, right? You have to take something that you've learned and transfer it to a new and novel situation. And I think that's where we fall short again in math, is that we learn, I pick on the quadratic equation. I can solve the heck out of that. It's like my favorite math problem, but I don't know what it solves. And so what if we took this opportunity to create something using this quadratic equation, which is very useful in according to math teachers, building bridges. But I don't know that. I don't even know if that's true because I didn't do that transfer of knowledge. So go create something using one of these math concepts, and now we'll understand.
Yeah, and playing off of that makes me think of Desmos. Desmos comes to mind with that because you plug in, high school Spanish teacher here, so I'm just going to say you plug in some math and you get a picture and it starts to show you kind of like what it is, like there's that transfer, right? And so you can finally start to see the math take shape and you get to see,
the axis, the one, I don't even know the terminology here, but it's so cool.
Yeah, you've got the English teacher and the Spanish teacher trying to talk about math. I'm sorry for anybody that's listening to this that teaches math that's probably really frustrated with us right now.
This conversation is also making me think about the importance of essential questions. You mentioned this idea that we should, if we, none of us are math teachers, but hypothetically, if we're math teachers, that we should look for ways to make connections. And that is actually an essential question. How is math useful in the real world? Right. And so there are some of these essential questions that you can actually find in Jay McTighe's book, right? Essential questions that list out some different essential questions. And just to use those as kind of a place to look at and say, how can I tie whatever it is that I'm doing to this thematic, transcendental question, something that is knowledge that's transferable beyond my individual classroom. And if you can connect what a student is creating to something like that. Now we can create something in Book Creator, actually, which is something we're working on with teachers right now to look at that exact example. How do we take something like square roots? I believe it's square roots, Tom, that we're doing. Square roots and take it from a basic assignment and move all the way into how can you now have students show how they would design a dorm room using square roots. And that can come from that rootedness in essential questions. And so I think that can be a powerful resource for teachers who are looking for ways to make their creative assignments meaningful, like an immediate kind of tangible thing that they can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've got to know where you're going, right? It's kind of like a roadmap, right? And so if you can chart a course to a worthy destination like that, then I think you're right on point there.
That would be the two elements of backwards design. Like you have the key understanding, you have the key way students are going to show it, and if that can be creating something, then it can be really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And
exactly.
my motto right now is let the students create. You have these devices. 90% of schools, I heard yesterday in the leadership exchange that we had, 90% of schools have a device for kids. And I said this in our kind of transition to this. We're hearing people say, we don't want kids to have screen time. And kids are supposedly saying that they don't want screen time. That's not true. Mm-hmm. They don't want Google Slides with links out to tasks that they have to do, the checkbox. They want to create. And then we'll stop hearing about screen time.
Yeah. Related to screen time, Austin Kleon, who wrote the book, Show Your Work and Steal Like an Artist and everything, I get his emails on a regular basis, and he's got an elementary age son, and he talks about the difference between screen time and, I can't remember, I think he had a catchier phrase than this, but it was like meaningful screen time. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between consuming a bunch of YouTube videos and TikTok videos mindlessly and stuff, mm-hmm. and making something on the screen. And if you're immersed in, if you get into that flow state of sorts, where you're actually doing something with it that's meaningful, that's a whole different thing. Playing Candy Crush for 3 hours, although some people are advocates of games, would talk about the power of that too. But again, it's all about intent, right? What are we trying to get out of this time? And there's a difference there, I think.
I love that you brought up the concept of flow, because I think that's another, we can look at creativity as a skill, a 21st century skill that's vital for the future of work. I think we can also look at it as a deep engagement strategy, which is essentially flow. You're so engaged in activity that you lose track of time.
I love that.
And what if we could create as many of those types of experiences as possible for students? How would that change the culture, not just for students, but for us as teachers? You have experiences where students are in flow, that, then it can bring a lot of joy to your classroom.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I always talk about the first time that I really, really noticed technology being able to do that, it makes me think of some of those old Apple II GS computer games, Reader Rabbit and Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego and stuff. It always makes me think all of those teachers that brought the kids down to the computer labs and let them play with those games. Now, of course, this isn't creating exactly. There are some elements of it, I think, but they got into that flow state, and it got them engaged in a way that they never could with a textbook, and the teachers that were willing to, the trailblazing teachers that were willing to try that out, even though nobody ever did it. Nobody learned that way in the 80s and before, they were willing to try that out. And so there's a whole risk reward thing, I think, that if we don't try some of these things and we don't give kids outlets to use creativity in their work, we'll never get that. We never get that reward. Sometimes some risks are worth taking if they've got huge potential benefits,
And I think we don't have a lot of time left, and I just want to put this out there, though. We're entering a hashtag creator economy. And as we go into AI and we go into these things, the jobs that will be available for kids are creating things, because that's what AI cannot do effectively.
Right.
And so if we're talking about the future and our kids are going to graduate into 2030s and go into retirement in the 2080s, and that's their time period, they're going to go in, I'm always making fun of 1985, as you know, they're going to go into retirement in 2085. And it's going to be a creator economy, so we have to do right by them.
Absolutely.
That's right. You can't automate creativity.
Yeah.
Right. And so to future-proof yourself and for us to do the jobs that we're supposed to do, which is prepare the future citizens of society, we should teach creativity. Awesome.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation.
Yes.
It was wonderful. I feel like I could chat with you all for
the
entire afternoon about
yeah.
creativity. So thank you again for coming by. And we know we have a panel coming up a little bit later with you, Matt. We're going to be talking about tech tools for universal design. So really looking forward to listening in on that panel. And Holly, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.